Welcome to Cornell Keynotes. I'm your host, Frances Caton, here with the Cornell Center on Democracy. Today, we'll be taking up the question of what it takes to combat democratic backsliding. We'll be looking at the case of Poland, where in 2023, civic mobilization and a vast electoral coalition facilitated a change in power after 8 years under the Law and Justice government. Throughout today's presentation, you might also hear us refer to this government by the acronym PEACE, which are their initials. That government engaged in substantial democratic erosion from 2015 to 2023. And since the 2023 elections, however, this now ruling coalition has struggled to restore democratic norms and institutions. To help learn more about the Polish case and what lessons it can teach us for other countries around the world facing similar democratic threats, we're joined by an esteemed panel across academia, civil society, and politics. To briefly introduce everyone, we're joined by Professor Mikołaj Czesnik, who's the director of the Institute of Social Science at SUPS University and chairman of the Council of the Stefan Battery Foundation.
Hello.
Next, Mark Tatala, the president and co-founder of the Economic Freedom Foundation.
Hello.
Third, Michał Wawrykiewicz, who is a member of the European Parliament and co-founder of the civic initiative Free Courts. And finally, Dominika Lasota, who is a student and activist at the Youth Climate Strike Poland and co-founder of the East Initiative. We'll get started with a range of questions directed at the full panel. And then viewers, we're interested in hearing from you today, and we'll take your questions at the end of today's discussion, so you can submit those throughout today's session in the chat. For panelists, for each question, you can take a few minutes to answer them. We'll go in order that I just introduced everyone, and then reverse order back and forth throughout the questions. So we'll get started with a kind of overarching question around the 2023 elections in Poland, which were broadly heralded globally for the importance of this opposition coalition and uniting together to unseat law and justice. To help provide some broad perspectives on this election for those that might know less about the Polish case, can you help us understand how did this unity emerge in 2023? And what brought opposition parties together into a coalition that could defeat the incumbent party? In particular, we're interested in the advice and lessons that you think that other countries can draw from Poland as a success case in this regard in 2023. Professor Czesnik, we'll start with you.
Yes, first of all, thank you for the invitation and thank you for having me here and sharing some thoughts about the democratic restoration, so to phrase it, and the post-backsliding situation, or some say the front-sliding. Also, this term is being used. First of all, there is no doubt that the opposition, nowadays ruling opposition, opposition until 2023, won the election and then formed a different government that actually started restoring democracy in Poland, or stopped the backsliding at least. However, one needs to remember that in our system, this victory was not optimal. That's very important. If all these parties that formed a government after the election, if they actually were running for office together, the victory would be much, much bigger. And probably it would be, I don't know whether someone did a sort of estimation of that kind, but probably if they went together, if they formed one electoral list, now the situation with the current president especially would be much easier. Didn't happen. It didn't happen. So that's first point. It was a victory, no doubt about it. It really changed the politics after 8 years of backsliding, authoritarianization, whatever you call it, and the situation has changed, no doubt. But if you compare it, for example, with TISA in Hungary, it seems that Peter Major much better understood the system in which he and his party is operating. That's one point. And the other one, thanks to that, his victory was sort of much bigger and really gave him a mandate to change more that Donald Tusk and his coalition can do right now. The second thing that I would like to emphasize is the background of this victory. It was not the elite unity, and actually, one needs to remember that the turnout was super high for the Polish standards. It was more than 74%. Actually, the highest ever recorded in Poland. One needs to remember that when we started the first fully democratic election in 91, it was 43.2. Even in the semi-democratic election in 89, the electoral turnout was around 62, 63. So it was really a sort of very, very high and very intense mobilization. But it was bottom up, not top down mobilization. And I know that later on we will discuss the issue of civil society and citizens' mobilization. But as I said, it's all about, or mostly it's about masses, not the elites. Uh, these people who won this election and the parties that won the election, they are very diverse. Actually, they are super diverse, as is Polish society. Of course, well, talking to Americans and talking about fractures and conflicts and tensions within the American society, probably Poland is less polarized, but it is still one of the most highly polarized societies in Europe. Francis knows it very well because this is one of your topics in your studies, and it's I hope it's not a secret that we know each other for a longer time, and we have cooperated already in several projects. So the thing that was behind this success, and the thing that was actually a sort of glue that put these people together, was sort of I would say these people voted against PIS, against the Law and Justice. The party, even though it's their voters also believe that they are Democrats. That's very interesting. We know it from the European Social Survey that actually the support for democracy as an idea, but also the support for several purely democratic aspects of a polity, like free and fair election, is super high, not only among uh, the current coalition voters, but also among the law and justice voters. So, but it was the main theme, the main topic was whether we were going to live under the law and justice rule, which is a sort of non-liberal democracy or non-democracy at all, or whether we are going to at least go back a little at least to what Poland was before 2015, meaning a sort of liberal democracy, the European liberal democracy that you see mostly within the European Union. And I know that the time is limited, but I would like to also underline two social groups that were particularly interesting and important. That was the women and the young ones. And for various reasons, not exactly the same reason. Okay, I see now that I have only 20 seconds or so. So the very last thing that I would like to emphasize is that we know that the Democrats, let's call them this way, though still are some doubts about to what extent this how democratic is the current democratic government. But what I would like to emphasize is that this is still quite a new situation because we are only, even though we are 3 years after the election, these processes normally take longer than just weeks or months. And I think I will stop here. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much, Professor Chesnik. That was a great introduction. We'll now turn to Mr. Tatawa, who will help us further understand what brought these opposition parties together in the coalition and what other advice that he believes that other countries can draw from Poland.
Thank you for the invitation, and to continue this discussion about the united opposition, I think it's important to emphasize that it was, as mentioned before, not a united party list. We had choice, and of course there are a lot of theoretical models showing that in our electoral system the one party list could be more optimal, but I am also not so sure, because it was also the moment of a lot of emotions, but a lot of people united against the law and justice government, with people with very different views. So having this choice with more center-right, center-left politicians, more enthusiastic towards the EU and more rationally looking at the European Union, I think it was important for the voters. Nevertheless, the scale of mobilization was, of course, very huge, and this huge turnout was something that was that made this electoral success possible. We have different electoral system in Polish Senate, and here the only optimal solution is to have one candidate supported by all Liberal Democrats, because we have single vote districts, so fragmentation is something that is harming the Liberal Democratic camp. And here the coordination really worked. We won the Senate, or the Liberal Democratic side won the Senate elections not even once but twice using this strategy. And here it was obvious that the list should be united. I am not so sure that in the parliamentary elections the united list was the optimal, and it was probably not even realistic from the political point of view, because we are NGOs. We cannot force politicians to sit in front of the round table and agree. It's their choice. And observing this process, I noticed how difficult it was, to create this agreement. What I also think was very important was a broad mobilization of the civil society, of organizations of very different political views. And as a classical liberal free market person, free market follower, I was always saying I want to, debate the future of the tax system, climate policy, regulation with social democrats, with conservatives in the system, which is operating under the rule of law. So, when we can really have a serious discussion and serious checks and balances, and it is why there are a lot of, activities organized by NGOs with more left-wing, right-wing, centrist views on various issues, which I think was very important, that we had this common goal to make sure that the process of urbanization of Poland that started in 2016 with attacks on various checks and balances, independent institutions, was not completed, was not as advanced as in Hungary. And to finish and to compare the situation with Hungary, I think, in Hungary they also had elections in the past when opposition parties were more divided. But I think the level of destruction of the state and the capture of the state was much more advanced. So this perception of that if we lose these elections, there might not be other elections was much stronger in 2026 in Hungary than 2023 in Poland. It is why it was much more easier to have this united list there. So we also should look, I think the people who have similar problems in other countries should understand their electoral system, but they should also be realistic about what can be achieved with politicians they have in the game, and what are the expectations of civil society. And I think here the expectations for having a choice was also important.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now we'll turn to Mr. Wawrykiewicz, who will share more with us about the lessons that we can learn from Poland in 2023.
Hello, everybody. I welcome you from a quite unique place for today's Yerevan, Armenia, and where we had the parliamentary elections yesterday. I just completed the European Parliament mission, observation mission. In that sense, it's also a very interesting topic, but not for today. Answering your question, actually, what was the recipe for the success of the kind of coalition between civil society and democratic opposition? We need to remember that was a very long story. That was not only the momentum in 2023, it actually that specific cooperation and unprecedented situation started back in 2015 when Law and Justice Party, quite purposely called, started to govern and started their attempt on the judiciary. They started immediately to take over the whole judiciary, starting from the Constitutional Court. And that was the moment when immediately people took to the streets and reacted immediately and very firmly. That was also the reason, that was also the difference between Poland and Hungary. That is why Hungary had to have 16 years of the complete destruction of the state to regain democracy, because their civil society, their legal community was quite passive for a long time. We had the chance to be there in 2020 to discuss with Hungarian judges at the beginning of 2020, and that legal community was completely passive, as I said, and that's why it was much easier for Orban to govern the country in an autocratic way and to create the oligarchy together with his friends. But the Polish case was a different case. As I said, the civil society created the movement just after the first attack on the judiciary, so quite immediately. After something bad started to happen, after the first red line was crossed in Poland. And I think that was the one of the factors, one of the reasons of the final success in 2020, because civil society was consecutive for all of these years, for all of these long years, and after defeats because we need to remember that in 2019 there was a defeat in the parliamentary election, there was a defeat in the elections for the to the European Parliament. In 2020 we had defeat when it comes to presidential elections. So that was a long process, and the civil society, I mean the whole society actually, was very patient and very consecutive when it comes to the reaction against the violences of the democratic construct, democratic architecture of the country by law and justice. And right at the beginning, not only those very stable, long-lasting civil society organizations were reacting, like Batory Foundation, like Helsinki Foundation, but also a lot of new ones created at that time, being a fast reaction for the activities of the government, and quite neutral, quite I would say obvious cooperation between civil society, because between the whole society, not only organizations, not only NGOs, but also the society as a whole, with Democratic Party, was something obvious, because we took to the streets together, we organized demonstrations together, we had the similar voice when it comes to the battle on the European level. I mean, the European Commission level, European Parliament level, both European courts, the Court of Justice and Court of Human Rights. So we participated in the fight for the democracy together, civil society and democratic opposition at that time. So the moment when the elections were won in late 2023 was the moment of the long march towards democracy. That was the final round of the long fight, and I think that the recipe for success is to be first reactive for the first moment when the first red line is crossed, when the democracy is violated at the beginning. So you need to react very fast and very firm. This is the first point of my recipe. And the second, to be patient and consecutive and work as a long march towards the regaining of democracy and freedom. So I think this is the most important thing from my side. Cooperation between the civil society and politicians from the democratic sides, and also engaging as many citizens as it is possible, because we need to remember that in 2023 we had very active, for example, influencers in the civil society, not in civil society, in social media. They were also very reactive, and they were very effective at that time, producing films to convince people that they need to go for the elections.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And lastly, we'll round out this first question with Ms. Lasota.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. It's interesting to speak about the parliamentary elections and the big victory, because I most vividly remember when at the beginning of 2023 we were all bracing ourselves for the third term of Law and Justice. That was the spirit in the country. The spirit in the country in January, February, March was that we are years into opposing the law and justice policies. We have all, or at least so many of us, have gone to the streets so often, especially women, young people, and so on. And nothing has changed, nothing has moved, and nothing will move. That was the vibe. That was the atmosphere. And there was even a research conducted among young women aged 18 to 35 about their willingness and motivation to go to vote, and half of them were stating to the research that they do not plan to vote in the elections, because that dissatisfaction and the hopelessness about this whole political puzzle was so huge. And so I remember very vividly when in spring we were sitting all together with my friends and activists from the youth movement, and we were thinking to ourselves, like, how is it that all of these people, they just are giving up? But then when we asked ourselves how we truly felt, it became clear to us that, yeah, we are also so hopeless and exhausted and tired that we aren't really surprised that was the kind of atmosphere going around the country. But at the same time, we knew that we were so done with this boomer politics, with this system that was so against our core needs, so against our core rights, that even though we sort of felt like the chance for change is very slim, we literally, I remember we were sitting at that table and we just told ourselves that, okay, for these few months up until the elections, we will believe that it is possible to actually change the situation, no matter if it actually is possible, and that we will have a lot of fun doing it, and that we will try to just show to this whole, political class that they cannot just continue all of this mess that they have pushed us into. And so we started organizing across the country with young people, with women. We would do all sorts of crazy things. We would go to music festivals. We would show up at political events and confront politicians. We would essentially show that there are, despite the dire situation and the tough atmosphere that was around, we would show to other people, especially using social media, but also in traditional media, that we just are there, that there are people in this country that still believe that there can happen, like the change can happen in autumn, and that we're crazy enough to just do everything we can to really shake up our nation. And it took us many months, and there were so many people doing all sorts of things here and there. For us, the most crucial element of this battle was we decided that we truly believe that if someone was to be the decisive voter of these elections and the game changer, it would be the young people and it would be the women, because Law and Justice has attacked women's rights so strongly with the abortion restrictions in 2020. But as I said, like, women were completely disillusioned and really unwilling to be part of this game. And so what we decided to do was actually, stop like convincing all of these opposition leaders to listen to us, because we were so tired of this whole discussion whether the list should be unified or not, who's better, who's worse, like there was nothing about our lives in this whole talk. And so we decided that we will just direct the attention on us, on our rage, on our fear, but also on our demands and on our power. And this is how we decided to film this video with just like hundreds of women. That was called "We've Been Silent Already," when we showcase the different daily struggles that women have to face and young people have to face in our country. And then with the political voiceovers and the comments of the politicians playing in the background. And there's the final scene when people turn their silent finger into a middle finger, and this is how they show what they're going to do towards this government. And it worked, and it brought the sense of power to the people. And I think this is what drove them to the polls, to give this whole political scene a chance. Where we are at now is a whole different story, a trickier story. But if you ask me how we did it, I think that was the way.
Wonderful. That was a great opening from everyone, and I think it introduces many of the themes that we'll keep touching on throughout the panel. So many of y'all have addressed the important role of this relationship between civil society and their mobilization. And we're interested here now in learning a bit more about the relationship between civil society and opposition parties. There's, of course, a tension for civil society between retaining its autonomy and maintaining distance from parties and pushing the parties on those issues that they care about, as well as also supporting the coalition and mobilizing voters. And so we're interested in learning more about how civil society managed this, any perhaps formal instances or informal platforms that this occurred through. And so we'll go in reverse order for this question, and so we'll return right back to you, Ms. Lasota.
Yeah, so just to clarify, we're now talking about post-election reality.
Still in 2023, if we can, and then we'll turn to the post-election reality towards the end.
Yeah,
Thank
perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how did we navigate this? I think different initiatives did it in their own style. The way we approached this as young people, as the youth movement, was essentially to try to counter this political scene as a whole. We were interested in just bringing change. We weren't interested in this or that opposition leader, because to many of us, they really represented similar things and similar, let's say, willingness or unwillingness to interact with us. But we were there we essentially wanted to open the doors for change. So from our side, we weren't negotiating with them. We weren't coming to the table with them or asking them and so on. We were basically saying that we deserve, as a country, we deserve politicians who are going to serve us, who are going to represent us, who are going to care for social justice and for policies that really change the daily realities of people. We want democracy, and we do not want all of this like boomerish, undemocratic bunch of people who have been making us stuck for these past 8 years. So I would say we really were reclaiming our power, and we really it seemed like, and this is something that we learned from Hungary actually, from activists there, who said that one of the reasons behind their defeat in 2022 was that they focused so much on just rallying behind this one opposition leader. So much of the public attention went into creating the list and making sure that there is this perfect leader that's going to really defeat attack Orbán, but there wasn't the whole mobilization of the society, the energy, the social energy was missing. And so we decided that no, we will not focus on the candidates specifically. We will focus on actually like uncovering the spirit and the willingness for change and the determination, like essentially that fire that is very much inside Polish people.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We will now return to Mr. Wawrykiewicz for this question.
Well, actually, at that time, I was inside the civil society. I was co-running NGO Free Courts. So we were working in the sector of justice, so the judiciary. So it was quite easy and obvious because the situation was black and white. Law and Justice Party attacked judiciary in Poland and wanted to take over the control on courts in prosecutor office. So our role was quite obvious at that time. We were striking back and fighting their decisions and their legislation in front of the courts, mostly in front of the European courts. So at that time, the path to the victory was the same in that sector, on the side of the civil society and on the side of opposition parties. So we were not in the conflict. We were rather those who were running the narrative and who were helping them to take this narrative and be more efficient in their job in the parliament. Because actually the opposition at that time in the parliament could not do anything apart from being vocal, because they could not stop any legislation in the parliament. The Law and Justice had the final majority in the parliament and the signature of the president, so they could pass any law, and they also took over the control on the constitutional court. So they didn't have also the constitutional control over the legislation that they passed in the parliament. So they have a full power. So the opposition in the parliament could be only vocal and could repeat and repeat that this is the violation, this is the violation, and so on, so on. But we did the part of the job which was, let's say, effective, because we went to the courts, we went to the European courts, and we got these verdicts from the European courts, which were effective enough to slow down the autocratic march of the governing party. So at that time, in that sector, the cooperation between NGOs and the opposition was quite easy. We were not arguing so much. They were rather learning from us what to do, how to do, and how to navigate in that judiciary world, and how to describe the situation from the narrative point of view. So that is my impression from that time. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Mr. Tatala.
I think it's important to find a right balance between, being too close to politicians and not talking to them at all. And, there are some civil society activists or NGOs saying, oh, we just want to be very separate from politicians. But I think in the political situation of Poland, it was bad strategy. We had to talk, to meet with each other. On the other hand, you have to remember that in the situation when the media environment, especially public media, is captured by the other side, these relations can be also risky, not only between politicians and NGOs, but also politicians and members of legal professions. Even if these were not true relations, the appearance at the similar marches defending the rule of law by politicians and judges was presented by the propaganda media outlets as, politicization of judiciary, which was, of course, a propaganda tool, not a real politicization. So it is important to understand how these relations between civil society and politicians can be used by the other side. And we also saw similar stories in Hungary, where NGOs and their relations with some politicians, not even from Hungary, but also from Europe, from Brussels, were demonized, were presented as something evil and used in electoral campaigns. What I think is also important is to remember that there was also business community, and I think in 2023 they realized that it's important also to mobilize on the side of the pro-EU liberal democratic side. There was funding for a lot of NGOs campaigns, so they could use professional communication tools, but there was also funding for political parties. And in Poland we have these transparent registers of donations. We had the record number of donations for Civic Platform, for example, and a lot of people from Polish business community were not afraid of being in this register and showing also their political preferences through donation. Because, as I said, the system was fortunately not as captured as in Hungary. I think in Hungary, the level of fear among the civil society was also much bigger. And what I also think is important is to use the mistakes of the other side as your advantage. I think a big mistake of the Law and Justice in 2023 was to combine a referendum with elections. They hoped that referendum can help them. Referendum on very polarizing topics like immigration, like the retirement age, like state-owned companies, or the border on Poland-Belarus border, the wall on the Poland-Belarus border. And they hoped to use this referendum as a tool, to channel some money into referendum campaign, to promote the questions, to use the resources. But a lot of NGOs, for example, and also politicians were encouraging people to boycott the referendum. And actually, speaking about this boycott and the fact that it was successful, so the turnout for referendum was much lower than the turnout for the elections, was important to give this energy that you go to vote for the politicians that can restore the liberal democracy in Poland, but you can also go and say no to this stupid idea of politicizing the referendum on serious topics, but asking questions in a very manipulative way so that the referendum was used as a political tool for kind of illegal financing of the electoral campaign, not really to solve any serious questions. So make sure that you use the mistakes of your political or ideological opponents as your advantage in fighting with democratic backsliding.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And finally, we will close out this question with Professor Chesnik.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more with Marek Tatała with the last, with almost everything he said, but especially with the last sentence. Well, before I go to this particular question after 2 rounds, I would like just to remind us about several issues that has not been raised so far. First of all, Law and Justice won the election. Well, they did not succeed in staying in power. Nevertheless, they were the first ones. That's one thing. The second thing is the number of those who voted for peace was really high. I mean, and it paid off in 2025 when Nawrocki won the election. So when we discuss the results, you need to think about the other side and the huge political support for the other side. Now, I think that there are two elephants in the room that we have not yet discussed. First of all, that's the pandemics, and then the war in Ukraine. I mean, these two had a lot of impact on how people voted in 23. And again, there is no time and space for discussing that, but there is little doubt that it had an impact, mostly negative than positive, on the Law and Justice support, and it made it even harder for them to win the election. Now I'm moving to the civil society, and for that I need to change my hat from the academic to the Stefan Batory Foundation, member of the board, and now the member of the council. Actually, I was elected in 2016 to the board and stayed until 24. So almost all the time of Law and Justice in power, I was in the Stefan Batory Foundation board. And actually, as far as I remember, both Dominika and Michał were beneficiaries of several actions undertaken by Stefan Batory Foundation. And this is, again, just to show you the broader audience that the difference between Hungary and Poland lies in the strength of the civil society. And the civil society, of course, it's not. Uh, it's quite weak, but stronger, no doubt, than the Hungarian civil society. This is partly due to less power that was given to Kaczynski than power given to Orban by the citizens in 2010 and later on. So the thing is that even though the resources were limited, but there were some resources. On the one hand, it was the Stefan Batory Foundation because this foundation, at least for the Polish standards, is quite. There are some money that can be spent and was spent actually when the public money was not running to the civil society. But then one needs to remember about, for example, the Norwegian money that came, and it was very important for the civil society actions and survival, I would say, during all the period. There were also some EU money, etc., German money, American money, uh, until 24, of course, because and not necessarily between 2016 and 2020. With Biden, it changed. Then again, it changed. So I think that that was very, very important. Also, the thing that I would like to emphasize is that in Poland there is basically since the 80s the ethos, and there is a tradition uh, of civil society that is quite unique. The solidarity legacy is still, I believe, well, I know it, but also I really, I think it's something very important and worth mentioning here that solidarity, the legacy of solidarity trade union, or rather movement. I mean, officially it was a trade union, but solidarity, it was a social movement, huge social movement. I mean, 10 million people in the society of 27 million grown ups. So it was a huge, really huge movement. And this tradition of being against authoritarian rule, authoritarian politicians, was revived in a way after 2015, in 2016, and later on. And I think that the democratic side, so to phrase it, uh, 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 was able and actually benefited from this tradition of being against. That would be yet another aspect of this resistance, if you wish, and another important aspect of this civil society effectiveness. Uh, and of course, because I'm looking on at your question is how civil society, how was it possible to maintain autonomous and independent? First of all, resources, though limited, but still there were some resources. But secondary, the ethos and the tradition of fighting for freedom and democracy, not fighting for this party or another party. This is why, well, in a way, so many activists and so many members of the civil society organizations and movements are so, how to phrase it nicely, disappointed with the current government actions and policies because they actively supported the opposition at that time, nowadays coalition, but they were expected much more than now is being delivered. I think I will
Wonderful.
stop here.
No, that's great. And I think that's a great segue. So I'll actually jump ahead to the last question we prepared, and it also aligns with one that we've gotten from our audience. So I'll also add that in here, which is looking to kind of this time period after the 2023 elections. This coalition that won has fractured at both the elite level as well as at the mass level, as well as in its support from civil society. And so in your view, we'd love to know more about what have been some of the reasons behind this and what advice you have for coalitions seeking to democratically unseat liberal leaders in other countries to perhaps not face those same challenges. And then here's where I'll add this additional question from a member of our audience who has said that I'm curious to know how Poland can utilize its democratic institutions to counter and contain growing right-wing extremist movements. And so we can think here too about the rise of Konfederacja, which for those who don't know is a further right-wing party that's gained a lot of popularity in Poland since the 2023 elections. So for this question, we will actually start with Ms. Lasota.
So I think the reason behind the trickiness that happened right after the parliamentary elections is, as was mentioned today already, is that the coalition that was going to the elections united under the common banner of fighting with law and justice. They wanted to beat law and justice. But then when it came to actually governing the country, it turned out that these parties have very little in common. And not only that, but that they do not have the capacities to actually talk with each other properly and align on a few common goals that would show to the society that, okay, there is some kind of united direction for us to go out of all these crises that we were stuck with law and justice. And for us, very early on, we started noticing the fractures. We started seeing how some of the crucial topics, like the reproductive rights, were pushed back to the side or postponed, prolonged, because they were uncomfortable for the new government leaders. Or we saw that some of the policies from Law and Justice were actually continued or reinforced by the new government, which made us feel like, which made us ask ourselves, is it really like a change in how politics is done in this country? Or is it just change in the style of the suits and the aesthetics of how the nasty politics is done? And sadly, to this day, there are a lot of areas that the government has not delivered, and that now to this day raise a lot of grievances, especially among less, let's say, advantaged, less well-off citizens in our country. But I do also want to stress one thing, that and this is because of a lot of self-reflection, is that I think civil society was not prepared for this victory. I don't think we actually knew what would happen if this crazy dream of actually ending law and justice rule would come to reality. And so obviously we were frustrated with the new governing coalition. We were angry at them. But I don't think that we in ourselves, in the big ecosystem that we form, that we knew what kind of country we want after law and justice is out. We didn't know. I didn't know, truly. Speaking with my friends, when we started discussing these things, and the months later, we realized that we're confused ourselves. And I think that confusion was shared. And this is why we were angry and frustrated with this new coalition for many months. But then after a year, really, we kind of told ourselves finally that, okay, like, let's just put these feelings aside and let's actually work on realizing what kind of country we want. And this process is going until today. We have built what is called Plan for Generations, which is kind of like an assembly of our demands and dreams as the Sunrise, as the movement that I'm part of. And we continue talking with different communities, bringing more people on board. And these days, I don't think a lot about the governing coalition. I think a lot about how can we, strengthen this vision and actually just walk forward. But if I were to give an advice to anyone who's watching, is one thing is the political representation, the politicians that you choose. The other thing is actually you as just, a grassroots organizer or a civil society member. You need to have the scenario, not for the failure, but actually for the victory. You have to prepare for the victory, because it is then that politicians, the new, better guys, fail the most.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now we'll turn to Mr. Pawrykiewicz.
Well, I fully agree that that was enormous expectation in 2023 towards politicians who took power then after 8 years of autocratic style government of law and justice. And we need to, that was the moment I also felt at that moment, like in 1989, that this is a complete shift of Polish politics and Poland towards democracy, towards modern country in many aspects, also reproductive rights, but in many aspects. And we need to remember about the reality. And the reality is that this is a very broad democratic coalition from very left side, social democrats, to kind of conservative spheres in the governments. And to stick it together, it is very difficult. And the other factor, which is objective, is the role of the president. So we can see that since the beginning of this new government, since late 2023, we have the two camps of power. One is in the presidential power palace, and the other one is in the headquarters of the government. And this is the permanent clash in that respect. So we see that any change, any legislation that is brought to the parliament and passed by the majority in the parliament is blocked by the president in these major spheres. So this is the factor that is really difficult to beat. So that is, I think this is the first reason of the frustration of the society, of citizens. So why didn't you deliver in that respect? I can refer to the topic of the rule of law, because it's not only close to my heart, but I was also very much involved in that sphere during law and justice time. And I am also very much involved nowadays, when I am on the side of the ruling party, ruling coalition, and I can see, and we have one of the representatives of the, let's say, civil society, legal community from that time, the most repressed judge at that time, Waldemar Żurek, is now the Minister of Justice and the Prosecutor General. And I can see it from the very short distance, how difficult is to deliver in this area, how difficult is to restore the rule of law after these crazy damage done by law and justice between 2015 and 2023. If you cannot pass the laws in the parliament, if these laws are not signed by president, are vetoed by president, it is really difficult to, or almost impossible to systematically restore the rule of law system. And this is also the reason of the frustration of the citizens. I am on their sides, actually, with my heart. I am also disappointed, but I can also understand from the point of view of this political machine why it is not possible to do that, why it is not possible to deliver, because of the objective situation. I mean, the block, the veto from the president's side. And even if the politicians, like today's Minister of Justice, Waldemar Żurek, is trying to do his best, and he's supported by the best lawyers who are doing their best for the restoration of the rule of law, it is sometimes impossible. But in other spheres, there are different factors and justifications of failures, which I also understand. That is the reason of frustration of the society and of a frustration of civil society, of NGOs. So the situation in Poland was unprecedented and is now unprecedented. And we need to understand that, and we need to learn lessons from the situation in Poland. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Mr. Tatala.
The opposition in 2023 was united by being against law and justice, not necessarily by having some, common governing agenda. And it was visible later when the coalition agreement was negotiated. It is very general agreement with very general promises, not a lot of details, because it was very hard for coalition partners from conservatives to social democrats to agree on certain points. So this was the uniting factor. And I think the problem is that voters nowadays are much more impatient. I think, social media and 24-hour television stimulates this activities. Also, the development of digitalization, Netflix, Uber, the food delivery, everything ready with one click in our phone app. People started thinking about politics this way as well. So they think, in few days we can change whole legal system in the country, and this is why there is a huge level of or growing level of frustration among some people, including also business community, who also had higher expectations regarding economic reforms in Poland. As Michał Wawrykowicz mentioned, the problem is also the veto of the president, and we are not like Hungary nowadays, where they have constitutional majority, when they can really do whatever they want within the legal framework of the European Union to change or restore or reverse some changes that were done by Viktor Orban's government. What I also think is important is how to maintain this mobilization in 2027, and I think, of course, it will be much more difficult. The level of fear will be obviously much smaller, because, we have people who will vote and were much younger when Law and Justice was in power. They don't remember what happened there. There are people who are dissatisfied. There are people who are frustrated. But we also have, and it was mentioned in the question from the audience, new political movements. Apart from Law and Justice, there is Confederacja, but there is another far-right party, even more crazy and in some areas openly pro-Russian. To some extent, this is good information for pro-EU Liberal Democrats, because there is some competition among these political parties. We see how Law and Justice is actually losing support, and some voters are moving to more extreme movements. The problem is that it may also, and we also see it now, that, I would say Law and Justice is becoming also more extreme in some areas, like their approach to European Union, now their view on the Polish-Ukrainian relations. And this is also, I would say, bad information, because I would love to see in Poland a normal, reasonable, conservative, right-wing party, and Law and Justice is very far from this definition of being reasonable, conservative party. What I think is also the problem is that the Liberal Democrats are, instead of trying to shape public opinion, they take what is happening in the public opinion as granted. And I will give you an example of immigration. I think the big mistake of the ruling politicians is not to show the positive story of immigration, of what happened in Poland since not even the second wave of Russian invasion in Ukraine, but also since 2014. It was something actually that created this huge economic growth of Polish economy during Law and Justice, because sometimes people ask questions, why you are complaining, the economy is growing? Yes, one reason it was growing, we had a huge inflow of Ukrainian migrants in 2015, 16, 17, and it was a huge booster for Law and Justice government, despite their anti-migrant rhetoric. Now we see growing anti-migrant rhetoric among the ruling coalition, and I think it's a mistake that they are not even trying to show this positive story, to show how migrants contributed positively to Polish economy, to Polish society, and how to create a reasonable migration policy in the future. And instead, they are sometimes, trying to copy some rhetoric of more far-right political parties, thinking that this is what is needed because people need this. I think the role of the government is also to shape public opinion, and I think the last months before 2027 elections should be used by the ruling coalition to try also to shape the public opinion, and not only to try to copy some popular approaches that are used by right-wing populists in Poland.
Wonderful. And now we will turn to Professor Chesnik to wrap us up with this question.
Well, I don't know whether I can wrap up the whole discussion, but there are a few points that I would like to make, and I would like particularly to catch up with what Dominique Lasuta said about those that you Americans call nowadays those that are left behind, right? When we think about the last decade or so and the developments of the Polish political scene, it's quite often we forget that there are deeper motives and actually there is something deeper than just the populism or authoritarianism of those who voted for law and justice or now vote for the Confederacja 1 or Confederacja 2, because now we have the two confederations. Uh, so the thing is that our political system is only a part of the social system, and the social system is as it is. I mean, it's very different from what it was before 89. And of course, it is a liberal democracy in the free market economy. And this free market economy has its advantages and disadvantages. And among the disadvantages, or one of the disadvantages of capitalism, and particularly in the last 20 or 30 years, is the growing inequalities. Basically, in our country, one need to remember that these inequalities are rising much more than earlier because under communism, even though the country was like all the communist or socialist countries, it was sort of equal, much more equal than nowadays, and very poor at the same time. So now we have several social strata that are living in very decent conditions or even in very good conditions. But there were, or there have been, since 89, like millions of people who were living either in worse conditions or especially in worse conditions relative to their to other people in Poland. So law and justice, to some extent, use these resentments and their success, particularly in 2015, and to some extent in 2019 as well, is the vote of those who were left behind and who, at the end of the day, got a sort of someone to represent them. Now, it's a long discussion. Actually, it needs a lot of time to discuss to what extent peace was really representing those left behind. Uh, Actually, it wasn't to that extent. But even in symbolic terms, and not only symbolic because there were, much more of direct financial transfers, all these 500 plus or 800 plus right now. Uh, so there was a sort of change of the policies. But my main point is that we now see, and this is, I'm not looking back, actually, I'm looking to the future right now. What I see is that after this almost a decade of authoritarian regime or authoritarian rule or, you know, democratic backsliding, let's put it this way, we are in an entirely different situation. We are in completely different situation. And my colleagues here, they actually show us the war, the pandemics, also the demography, etc., etc. So my point is, I see that Michael needs to go. So my point is that we are in a very interesting moment. I would say it's a constitutional moment, and the thing is that nowadays, in 2026 or 27, it will be very, very difficult, almost impossible, to agree on not only on the political system, right, on the regime, but also on this underlying axiology. And we need to answer actually the questions, what about taxes and how much of the taxes? And I know that Dominika can elaborate more on that because the youngsters in Poland, they live in the situation is changing year by year because there are more pensioners and less people on the labor market. And this is only one thing, but there are many which show that we actually need a new social agreement, so to phrase it. And this should be also a new constitution, most probably. But on the other hand, it's a threat. I mean, this discussion can be a threat because current constitution, even though it's not perfect probably, but it's not bad. So changing it right now with the current president, it can be really a danger. Thank you, and sorry for being pretty chaotic.
No, you're wonderful. This has been really great. We thank everyone for being here. We've really enjoyed this conversation on the political coalition in Poland and its relationship with civil society heading into and following the 2023 elections, as well as thinking on these underlying legal challenges and important issues that are really substantive issues that are important to face as we think about redemocratization. We'd like to thank all of our panelists again, as well as our audience, and to thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of the Cornell Center on Democracy, please stay tuned as we'll be having an ongoing series on these topics. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. All the best.